This is Retrohammer, Imperial Space Marines box set RTB01 from 1987. As a wargaming miniature collector today, it is easy to take for granted the diverse and high quality selection of plastic wargaming miniatures. Games Workshop now produce virtually all their models in plastic, including many multi-pose Space Marine kits, and many other manufacturers make comparable products. These offer the player the lowest cost option for building an army, along with the ability to stamp your own individuality on your figures and limitless conversion opportunities. This was not always the case, however, and back in the first half of the 1980s, all wargaming models for Warhammer 40,000 were made from white metal alloy, and creating large armies was expensive, not to mention very heavy to carry around. However, all that changed in 1987 when Citadel Miniatures released a new kit that was to forever change the nature of Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader, and indeed their tabletop wargames in general. The Imperial Space Marines plastic box set gave the player all the required components to build 30 Space Marines, armed with a mixture of weaponry, all for the price of £9.99. This was just over a third of the cost of the equivalent metal models, which retailed for £2.50 at the time. The Imperial Space Marines plastic box set was a gateway into the hobby for so many people at that time, myself included. The kit itself is a clever, economic design reflecting the purchase price. By using just 3 different sprues and existing plastic bases, mould costs were kept low, but the 3 sprues included a generous array of different arm posers, weapons and equipment. A set of water slide transfers rounded the kit out. In this very special unboxing review, we are going to open up a relic of the early age of Warhammer 40,000, Rogue Trader Box Set 01, or RTB01, as Games Workshop's product code was called. So, thank you very much for joining me today. I've departed from my usual freelance approach, and I wrote a little introduction there because we do have a very special unboxing here, and this is the Imperial Space Marines plastic box set, the original Warhammer 40k box set released by Games Workshop. For many people of my age and those who played Rogue Trader early on, this was the route into the hobby, and this was the first purchase that you may well have made. And certainly this has got an immense nostalgia, and I do apologise for getting a little bit too nostalgic as I make this video, but hey ho, you know, that's a great thing about making videos. So yeah, so this is, let's start by having a look around the box, which is quite large. So obviously, first thing, the cover is dominated by the famous Crimson Fist's Last Stand picture from the front of a Warhammer 40,000 rulebook, and this picture was by John Sibbick, who's a well-known illustrator and for a number of things, but this was certainly a highly iconic commission that he made, and is still used to this day by Games Workshop in association with the Warhammer 40,000 game. And it's interesting to reflect upon this, that the picture is certainly a brutal and gritty depiction of warfare by any standards, and it was somewhat it raised a few eyebrows at the time, this did, because Games Workshop were targeting this product of 12s and up, and clearly there's more than a bit of blood going on here, and a lot of gore, and indeed, this here we have a dismembered torso of some unfortunate Marine down in the corner. Various Marines have been killed and injured and laying dead and dying, and yeah, it did cause some controversy. And ironically though, the only adjustment made to the artwork was actually of this leader, and you can just see here that part of one of his fingers is missing. That wasn't an error on the part of the artist. In the original composition, this leader figure was holding the severed head of an orc warrior aloft, in defiance at the impending assault, and for the purposes of this box it was edited out to make it look less grisly. But and when we come on to a later part of this video, we'll come back to that little bit of censorship, we could call it. But yeah, so we have a front box, very 19 sort of a 80s style graphics, a picture of 3 assembled models. This was at the time when Citadel Miniatures, you know, were still very much used as an independent trading name. And then in the corner we have the original Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader badge, and that was indeed the badge that was on the front of the rulebook. Let's have a look around it. So we have depictions of colour schemes here for painting ideas, and these are from the original 12 chapters from the Warhammer 40,000 rulebook. And it does note here, colour, uniforms and painting guides for 12 of the 1,000 chapters of Space Marines. And that was very much part of this kit. It was a kit all about ideas and possibilities, because both in terms of how you build it and the posability of the miniatures, but also in terms of how you paint them. And with this statement here, we were being told, go ahead, create your own ideas, don't be constrained by what we've shown you already. And that's a really good thing. We'll continue around this box. You know, this box might be in the region of 30 years old, so it's not done too bad. And here's the other 5 of the 12 Space Marines. And most of these Marine chapters are still very prominent in the games of 40k, and most of them are first founding ones. Perhaps one exception is this little chap here, the Rainbow Warriors. They got somewhat sidelined, but perhaps a little. There was a little bit of a nod to the to Greenpeace in the 1980s there, who of course had a vessel called Rainbow Warrior. So I'm sure that's not a coincidence. Okay, let's take a look at the back of the set. So there's a picture of an assembled task force, so giving you an idea of how you might build them. Painted in the iconic Crimson Fist chapter. I mean, originally the Crimson Fists were what you might call the Ultramarines of the original 40k. They were the stock paint job to start with, but quite quickly the Ultramarines seem to have gained prominence. There's a schematic showing the various parts in the kit, and also a simple set of instructions showing you how to assemble them. And then there is a description, and here we are. We are the Imperial Space Marines. We are the guardians of humanity. We face the dangers no man may face. We are the Adeptus Astartes, masters of the stars, the Space Marines. Sterling stuff. And then there's a brief description of Space Marines, what they are, what the capabilities are. It tells you about weaponry options, and then it gives you this nice little weapon stat. And this is something, so straight away when you bought this set you had the rules for your models. I mean, you needed the main rulebook, which included it as well, but it was a nice little addition. And when I first played, we didn't have a rulebook, and we used these and we just made up a game around it. So yeah, it's quite neat. It would be nice to see Games Workshop to actually include rules in its models, as many other manufacturers have done. Interesting point on the original Space Marine. The Marine profile has not changed much, with the exception that Marines now are toughness 4 base. And the other thing you can't see here is the original power armour save was only 4+, and that was increased to 3+. Of course, with the introduction of the armour piercing system, it completely changed the dynamic of that, but the base save got tougher. A little bit of instruction guides, and for those of you who were collected at the time, there was this kind of little person, perhaps supposed to be you as a builder. So yeah, there you go. There's the box, right? Well, that is very carefully. So this is something I'm keeping for posterity at the moment. So I'll very carefully open this and take a look at the contents. It was quite a full pack. Oh gosh, there's more. There you go. That's everything. Yeah, it was certainly quite a full box when you'd buy it. I'll put that over there. Right. Now, first thing to note, so the colour of this kit, this is in a beige plastic. There was at least 2 other colours that this set was supplied in. It was supplied in a very dark blue, and that was a colour that the first box I ever bought was. It was a really, really deep blue. They then went on to a mid-green colour plastic, and then finally, I believe, we ended up with this sort of almost pale sand or bone coloured plastic. And obviously this was, from a point of view of painting, this was the best, the most versatile, best choice. So what do we get? So sets of plastic slotter bases. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you get 2 spare bases, which is a nice little thing to start with. A set of Space Marine transfers for our friends the Ultramarines. I think this is a box probably from the around 1990. I don't remember if the original packs came with this. Perhaps you do. Was the transfer sheet a later edition? I'll be interested if anyone knows. And also, I mean, were there any other plastic plastic colours used as well? This was all before the grey plastic that Games Workshop uses for all of its kits these days. So in my introduction, I talked about the simplicity of this kit, and the simplicity is that there are only 3 sprues that make up the whole of this kit. So with plastic model production, the big upfront or the big investment cost is in tooling the molds, which have to be made to a high tolerance and metal. So building those molds is an expensive part of the process. So by producing a set of sprues, and I've split these into the 3 types of sprues here, and we'll look at these in turn. By limiting the number of sprues, you reduce your manufacturing cost base. So there was a clever bit of economics that sat behind this kit, and no doubt played a part in that. What was at the time, even at the time, £9.99 was not expensive for a plastic miniature set. Far from it. Right, so let's look at the 3 sprues. So the first sprue is the Bolter Marine sprue. So every sprue has a pair of legs, so 2 helmets, 2 backpacks, 2 torsos, 2 sets of legs, a set of bolt gun arms. These were what later became Umbra pattern bolters. If you watch my review of the Imperial Space Marine, here we have a weapon that was much more conventional looking than the esoteric futuristic ray gun that miniature carried. You also got equipment pouches, pistols, the well-known bayonets. So there's a chain accessory bayonet and a knife bayonet, and then 2 knives as well. So every single Marine, he had his main weapon, he had his backpack, he had a combat attachment for his rifle, a knife, a pistol, and pouches. So this kit had lots of options there to build your troops in all sorts of different ways. The next sprue is what you might call the officer or the commander sprue, and this is a bit more. It's got the same legs, torsos, and heads, and then there is a power glove, and I have to call it a power glove, not a power fist, but a power glove in this review. Heavy weapon arms, so this arm and this arm fit with the missile launchers, and we'll come to those later. A bolt gun with handle attached, and then a set of pistol and clenched fists. And then also, as an extra, so not instead of, but as an extra too, you got an unhelmeted commander head with a bionic reticule on the side. The detail on the commander wasn't great, but you know, for the time and for what you were paying, that was fine. And they painted it well enough. And the final sprue is a heavy weapon sprue, and this includes a missile launcher, a flamer, 4 sets of missiles, another spare bolt gun, more arms, a power glove, And actually this half of it is a repetition of the Commander sprue. Now I believe that you only got 2 of these in the original set, but for some reason this has got a third, so, but I'm not sure about that. If anyone knows whether or not it was 2 originally and a third got added later, I'll be interested to know. So yes, 3 sprues, you got 18 Marines here, 12 Marines here, and then the heavy weapons there. So you got everything you needed to build a very diverse Marine force, and 30 Marines was almost enough for a 1,000-point game early on. So for just £10, you got a very gameable, usable force. And no doubt that this product helped 40k gain a foothold early on, particularly amongst younger audiences. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about the leg design. So the Space Marines on this box, and indeed John Sibbick's artwork, have these flared armoured greaves, as they do here. Now they were quite noticeably different to the original Imperial Space Marine design. So this is the original Space Marine from 1985, and you can see he has close-fitting armoured boots in the style of medieval full-plate armour. Now, why did they change the style on this? Because this early on they really didn't know what would sell and what was of interest, and I wouldn't have known this, but I was at a Warhammer Open day a couple of months back, and I got the opportunity to talk to Jez Goodwin, who was one of the people who designed this kit, and as well as in sharing that quite a lot of the sculpting was done with plasticine of the original models, he also said that these flared armoured greaves were a design choice to aid with the production, and apparently the slimmer legs of these models were abandoned because they were harder to release from the moulds, and also made the Marines weaker as well. So yeah, that's interesting, that, and something I never knew. I just always thought it was a style choice. So interesting that a necessity of production has influenced the entire look of Space Marines from here on in. Interesting detail point on the beaky helms. And yes, of course, the 2 famous nicknames that came out of this set was Beaky Marines and also Space Wombles. You know, the Brits amongst us will get the Wombles reference, certainly if you're old enough. But the air vents on all these Marines are vertical, as you can see here, which contrasts with the original Rogue Trader artwork, where the air vents were horizontal. And that was obviously an artistic choice on Sibbick's part, but it was never really a modelling choice until much later on. And 5 years ago, Games Workshop released a Finecast model to commemorate the 25th anniversary of Games Workshop. And there's a couple of interesting things here. Firstly, here's a return of the severed orc head, so no image censorship here because of not interested about selling, not worried about selling to kids. So the artwork's in its full original gory detail. But here, with the model, we can see that this commemorative model was sculpted with the horizontal air vents on his Mark VI armour helm. So that's an interesting thing. And indeed, of slightly more recent vintage, it's been very difficult to get models with that style of helm up until recently, apart from odd models that were done as metal models and occasional one-offs. But recently, Forge World have released a set of helmets for their Mark VI Marines with the original Sibbick style air vents or respirator vents, whatever they may be, for the helmets. And I had quite a nostalgia for it when I went and did a squad of 10 like that. I was well chuffed. So quite interesting that that I can't get the camera to focus. Quite interesting that 30 years after the event, we finally got that particular look in an accessible, repeatable way for our models. I think I had 3 of these sets in my early gaming days, and virtually all the models, I built them all, but virtually all the models I built I sold or gave away. But I do have a couple of examples remaining, and I just thought you might be interested to see those because they do show something of how this set is very convertible. And here's a first. So lots of interesting things about this guy. So this was a lieutenant from my Space Wolf force. I started off doing Space Wolves. Back in the day, you could give your guys all sorts of crazy weapons, including what would now be considered to be Xenos tech, one of the weapons of which was a shuriken catapult. And sure enough, I converted this shuriken catapult onto this lieutenant. He also had a bolt gun as well, so I don't know why you'd need a bolt gun and a shuriken catapult, but it looked great. Yeah. And it shows as well, you know, with a half decent paint job, and you know, it's not the best paint job this, but they look really nice when they're painted up. And you know, I've seen some absolutely fantastic paint jobs on these Beaky Marines. There you go, there's a nice close up. And then one other, this was a librarian. I gave him a banner and a power glove, and as was the rigor back then, you had your kills and your smash and all sorts of other slogans you put on your Marines. But I gave this guy a book, as if he were conjuring something from it. Slightly more neutral paint scheme I did on this guy. But again, just shows with a very simple set of poses and arms how you could create some absolutely fascinating poses on your models. And this is only, you know, these are the last two that I have, and there are many, many more. There are many wonderful conversions of Mark VI Marines. It was a very imaginative model. So yeah, RTB01, the Imperial Space Marines box set. This was sculpted by some of the veterans of Games Workshop. Jez Goodwin, Ali Morrison and Bob Naismith. So Bob Naismith was the sculptor of this Marine. Obviously Ali Morrison, Jez Goodwin, both very influential people. If you ever get to go to Warhammer Open Day and Jez Goodwin's there, have a look through his sketchbook, which he often brings, and you'll see very early on he came up with much of the imagery that is still being used for new products today. A very influential image person for the company. So there you have it, the Imperial Space Marines plastic box set RTB01 from 1987, the miniature set that really made 40k take off. And it's interesting to finish on reflecting that in the last year we've seen a return of this sort of philosophy of the large plastic box set with a huge number of options, a multi-posable marine in the form of the Betrayal at Calth and Prospero games. So yeah, interesting to think that after all this time, Games Workshop has come full circle with its Space Marine box sets, and they've come back to what originally gave them so much success. I think that's all I was going to say. I think these stopped being sold sometime in the early 90s. I don't know that. I think this one's probably from late 80s, early 90s. If anyone knows, I'll be very interested to hear in the comments. But yeah, I hope you've really enjoyed this. I know I've really enjoyed making this video. It's a real nostalgia trip for me. And if you'd like to share your own memories of the plastic Space Marines box set, please do down in the comment section. Thank you ever so much for listening. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.